Welcome back to Ace Chat. I am Marissa, and today we're doing something a little unique. Instead of speaking to someone else, Ace, we are speaking to someone who self identifies as Allo but is dating someone Ace, and who also has a lot of knowledge and experience in the field of relationships, relationship therapy. So, thank you for joining us today, Yana.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I am so interested in both your work because, as someone who is allo dating someone ace, I think that's something that a lot of people in the ace community want to know more about. And also, again, just that you have this more psychological perspective. So I'd love to just kind of start off by asking a little bit more about how you self-identify.
I self identify as an allo woman. There were some question about my gender identity, but I don't go into labels, so my pronoun is she. I'm an allo, and yes, I do work as a psychologist, relationship counselor, and all that.
How did you get into the field of psychology?
Oh, it wasn't right after school, actually. It was a conscious choice on my part. After I had my experience with a very good therapist, she helped me out a lot, and she showed me how good therapy can help you, well, pull yourself together and pull yourself out of very dark places. So at some point I decided, oh, I want to be that. I want to help other people do that.
That's great. I think that a lot of the times I hear one or the other where someone's had just an amazing experience with a therapist has completely changed their life, has just made them feel healthier and happier. But there's also obviously the opposite side where there's someone who maybe doesn't gel with their therapist, especially when it comes to queer communities, their therapist is not accepting of their asexuality. So I'm wondering if you know of any signs that someone should be aware of for this is going to be a good fit as a therapist, whereas versus maybe I need to keep looking.
Here I would say trust your gut and don't be shy to, first of all, give feedback to your therapist. So be open, check how your therapist reacts to whatever you say. It can be in the voice, it can be in the facial expression, whatever. And if you feel that something is off, don't try to ignore it, don't try to hide it. Don't be confrontational either, but just address it straight. Like, do you have a problem with my sexuality, with my orientation? I feel there is some tension that started when I told you ABC, and see how they react to that. If after that, if that confirms your suspicions, then don't be shy to say goodbye to this person, because it's absolutely your choice to work with a therapist who understands and accepts you.
I kind of feel like you're speaking to me directly because I've definitely had experiences with therapists where I should have asked if that was a quote unquote concern for them because they did not respond in a way that was helpful or positive or even accepting. I'm wondering, and this might be something because you are accepting and knowledgeable, you might not know, but why do you think some therapists are hesitant to accept people who come in and say they're ace, are more likely to say, well, let's work on some sort of therapy to help you overcome that, as opposed to, let's work on why maybe you don't feel you're trying to figure out your labels. Let's work on maybe why you don't feel comfortable telling others about them.
I'd say there are two reasons for that, two main ones. Unfortunately, I've seen many colleagues in the field who don't accept, who are not accepting. And in my opinion, there are two main reasons. First, we are all human. Some people are aphobic, some people are homophobic, whatever,
Mhm.
and some don't even know that. I've had conversations about different LGBT topics with my colleagues, and they would just start shouting for no reason, not even at me, just trying to prove some point. And I would ask them, like, why? Why are you shouting? They don't even notice it. And the second reason is many therapists believe they must be experts like in everything. In order to help out people, they need to feel like they are some sort of a guru that lights the way. Yes, you can sense the skepticism in my voice, of course, because I don't share this position. To me, working with a client is always learning about them, learning with them. But some people feel they must be this all knowing, enlightened person, and they just can't say these things like, let's figure it out together. And if they don't know about asexuality, if they don't know about something in the LGBT community, they start getting very nervous when they feel the client knows more about it than they do. It's really, it makes them insecure.
That is so unfortunate to come to someone to try and figure yourself out and to have them act like they're this all-knowing entity when none of us are all-knowing, when I would argue we know ourselves better ultimately anyway. So I'm glad you don't do that. I'm very glad too that you kind of focus specifically. You focus on various things, but that asexuality, asexual relationships are part of your practice. And I'm curious how you first got involved with the term, how you first learned about what asexuality was.
Unfortunately, if we're talking about the very first, I fell victim to the common prejudices because I had been a member of the LGBT community long before I met my partner, and even in the LGBT community, there is this sort of prejudice that asexual people are these wallflowers who aren't brave enough to venture forth into the wonders of sexual life, whatever.
Right.
Uh, I had this opinion. I never bothered to dispel it for myself. And it all basically changed when I met my partner. And the term I do prefer is that we're not dating. We've been together for 5 years. We're long past dating. We're partners.
Mhm.
And we started out as friends. So when at some point he came out to me and he said that he was asexual, it was, like a shock for me because I had two absolutely conflicting pictures. I had my image of an asexual, this stereotypical abstract picture of what an asexual was. And I had my friend who I was secretly in love with
Oh.
coming out to me as asexual, and it blew my mind.
You are so not the first person, though, obviously, to come across those stereotypes and to kind of have to reconcile the stereotype you've heard with the reality of the asexual you've met. And I'm talking from personal experience too. When I first heard the word asexual, and again, I ID as asexual, I was just like, I fell for every one of the stereotypes that they all wanted to be alone, they were frigid, they just this, that, and the other thing, which of course is not true. I mean, I'm sure it's true for some people the same way it's true for some allosexuals. But
Absolutely.
I just I wonder why this is such a widespread stereotype. And I wonder if psychologically, are there ways that we can combat these stereotypes beyond just like here's an example that shows that it's not true. Let the example speak for itself.
I'd say that psychologically speaking, combating stereotypes is a very time consuming and energy consuming things. Is good for activists who are really ready to do that, who see it as their calling. For regular people, it's really much better to live the way you are, be who you want to be, and not fall victim to either of the two extremes. One is I am this stereotype. If I am asexual, I must be that. And the opposite is I won't do anything that falls under this stereotype because I don't want to confirm
Mm.
it. Both are limiting. So the healthiest thing is just to be happy yourself, live the way you want to live, and just okay, acknowledge the stereotypes. But there are so many stereotypes about women, about men, about every nationality, every race, that if we start combating them all, there's no time left to live our personal life.
Oh my gosh, I love that advice. I feel like that was straight out of, like, I don't know, that was like dialogue written for a movie. Like that was the the big hype be yourself sort of scene. But that's such that I don't think we're told that enough. I think we're under this misconception that we have to act a certain way to fight against these stereotypes, that we or rather that there are just limitations everywhere. There are some people who think that getting into the asexual relationships, for instance, that those will never work. They think that if they will work, they have to work in this sort of way. I think we're just very confused in general in terms of how to truly be who we are. And going off of that, I would love to know a little bit more about you and your partner and what your relationship looks like today. Because you mentioned he came out and you weren't sure how to respond, but you were secretly in love. So how did things progress from there?
Well, because he is polyamorous and he had another partner back then, he still has his other partner. I was absolutely sure, well, there's nothing for me to hope for, and I did my best to be his friend. Unfortunately, or rather, fortunately for me now, I was so very much in love with him that I couldn't contain it very well. So at some point, I decided just to get the load off my chest, and I told him, like straight and bluntly, like, okay. I'm in love with you. I know there's nothing for me to expect. So just shoot me down, tell me I'm nothing but your friend, and we'll be done with this. Just for me to know there's no hope, to be absolutely sure about that. He didn't.
Wow.
Yeah, and it progressed step by step. I was very very careful. Maybe I was too careful because I was very much afraid of crossing his boundaries. Doing something that wouldn't sit well with him as an asexual person. So it moved slowly, sometimes clumsily. He helped a lot, and the most important thing was in our relationship was trust and clarity. He said what he liked and what he didn't like. I said what I wanted, and we worked from there. So basically, like in on every forum, in every topic, everyone says communication is key. Okay, it sounds like something absolutely banal, but it's really like this. Unless you are very clear, I'm afraid there's no way the ace and allo person can understand each other, because there are no cultural, stereotypic, or other inherited models how to manage a mixed sexuality relationship. So you have to discover it together, and you can only do that through communication. There's no other way.
That makes perfect sense because and I think you were hitting on this with every relationship, communication is key. So, I'm wondering, and as much detail as you want to give, are there any specific conversations that you 2 have had recently or even when this was starting out that really differed from what maybe 2 allos in a relationship would discuss? Or is there overlap in some of the things that need to be communicated, need to be understood about each other?
I'd say I wish so much that I'd had the same conversation with my, for example, Allo ex husband, because the conversation in this pattern, like what you want in bed, what you don't want, what you're ready to do, what is high risk behavior in bed for you and makes you uncomfortable, this is something Allo partners actually desperately need. Just most of them don't know that they need it until the point they hit couples counseling or something, or until the point they get divorced. Because
Oh,
this is something we don't know. It's expected that two allos intuitively click in bed, when actually the reality is very far from it.
I've been wondering that for because you'll see all of those. I don't know what they're called, but they're like these little checklists that two people in a couple will fill out saying what they're okay with, what they like, and sometimes there are sites you can even put them through, and it'll just tell you where you guys aligned, where you didn't. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense that you'd have to navigate that in any relationship because people have different things they're comfortable with, different things they are interested in. So I I think it's funny that we're all well, it's funny sad that we're all so worried to have this potential conversation with an allo partner when it's like, well, maybe we should all be having these conversations with everyone. So I think this is a great point to bring up. I have a few final questions. The first being obviously being in a relationship with someone, working with people in your field who are ace, what advice do you have for others who maybe are not ace themselves, but are trying to be an ally, trying to be supportive?
Listen to these people that you are supporting or trying to support, and they will give you most of the information on how to support them. So listen to them and trust them. Don't approach them with your set of norms. Once again, it's actually a very general advice about all people. And whenever I have a communication problem, a relationship problem, I don't mean romantic relationships, even parents and children kind of relationship, it's one of the basic things. Listen to them and don't impose your norms upon them. People don't really do it until they bump into some difficulties. Aces and their allies have already bumped into these difficulties from the start, and this actually gives them a huge head start. What I really love about working with aces is that many of them have this awareness of a person who's had a difficult experience in their life. Actually, the more difficult experiences you've had, if you have the time to reflect upon them and the desire to grow from them, this experience makes you wiser, and it really helps you in life.
I so agree with that. I you're like single-handedly convincing me to go back into therapy, but I think that's a good thing. Um, I'm wondering with ace and allo couples specifically, or two aces maybe who are dating in some sort of relationship, when do you think it's a sign that maybe they should be speaking with an expert about some of these troubles they're having, some of these obstacles they've had to overcome, versus when maybe it is something they can just talk to each other about, can just kind of manage on their own?
I think it's something you see with time. If there is a positive dynamic, maybe you are fighting over something, maybe things feel difficult, but you can look back maybe like a month and you see that 1 month ago the situation was worse. Now it's clearly better. It's a good sign. It's a sign that you are managing together. If you see that a month ago the situation was the same or even better and the dynamic is negative, it's a strong sign that you might need outside professional help.
That makes a lot of sense. Basically, to look for the patterns and the aberrations. Well, those were my main questions, actually. I am wondering, though, before we go, is there anything else you want to cover in terms of your relationship and Ace Allo relationship, in terms of aces seeking out this sort of help, in terms of relationships in general?
I'd say that one thing I really want aces to remember is that it's actually very difficult for two people to get together for a nice and healthy relationship. It's not just about asexuality, and it doesn't mean that aces should lose hope. Like, if it's difficult for two allos to reach a happy relationship, then what hope do I have? No, there are people who they can make really happy. I said it during the ACE conference, the international one, when I got to thinking, like, what would happen if my partner had decided that he's not worth being with me? I got so scared, really. How happy he makes me, how I I can't even begin to thank every power in the universe that we are now together. If he had decided that he is doomed, not worthy, and so on, I would lose so much happiness in my life. So it's not much more difficult for the aces. There are people who can be very happy with them. It makes me really so sad to see how many aces consider themselves doomed just because of their sexuality, like doomed to singlehood. It breaks my heart.
You've brought up a fascinating point because obviously, when seeking out a relationship, you should question, does it make me happy? But I think you're right. A lot of aces do have this kind of insecurity of, can I make the other person happy? And you're also right that the answer is yes. So I think that you've definitely opened the doors to this idea of communication is key, which is funny because our last Ace Allo pairing that we spoke with on here, that was the exact advice they gave. So, to anyone listening, I mean, you've heard it here twice now. Communication is key, and these relationships are possible. And when they work out, they are just as worthwhile as any other relationship, or sometimes maybe more worthwhile. So, thank you again so much for coming on and chatting with me today. I think this is really going to help a lot of people who are trying to navigate their relationships and their own identities.
I'm happy to have this conversation. I'm happy if it helps anyone. So I hope it does.
I think it's going to. If anyone wants to reach out to you further, follow you on any of the social platforms, how can they do that?
I do have my Instagram account, so, and I do post Ace Allo relationship tips there. I do hold live streams there where I address questions specifically for aces thinking about relationships or in relationships with allos right now. So if you post a link to my Instagram profile, I'll be very grateful.
I will definitely do that. Check the links below for the link to the Instagram profile. Maybe go and follow, ask some questions, watch some live streams. I know I'm going to. So, thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you, listeners, for listening to us. This, as always, has been Ace Chat, and thanks for being part of the chat.